guinea pigs at my trying to do this on Zoom. I haven't really given a platform with substantial pictures before, but trying to talk about this without pictures is no fun. So I'm going to do a couple things. One, I am going to share a different screen that I have that I'm hoping. All right, that's not the one I want to share. I would want to share the actual presentation. For some reason, it keeps kicking me back to the to this bit here. I'll try it again. See, now it won't let me do a slideshow. Well, there's only so many options here, Zoom. Let me go back here and try this again.
Can you put it in slideshow before you share?
I did, and when I go to share, it you know, it gives you the options of different ways that you can share. And so I'm picking the one that looks like it should be. Here we go. I just had to do it a couple times. There we go. All right, and that one is supposed to be blank, so it's okay. But I'm gonna back. I have to go to get my reading notes, and it turns out I can't do that and look at you at the same time. So you can use your imagination while I'm talking. So I really appreciate this opportunity. I have given probably hundreds of talks as a leader, but talking about the Ugandan Humanist Schools is my absolute favorite thing to do. And I hope that you find it as exciting and inspiring as I do to learn about these schools, to see what our humanist friends in Uganda are doing. I also want to say at the outset that supporting these schools has been a long-time ethical action project of the Ethical Society of St. Louis, and several other ethical societies and individuals have joined in with financial support as well. And if any of you as individuals or Mid-Rivers as a community decides to support the schools, I think that would be great, but that is up to you. And my purpose this morning is not to raise funds, but to hopefully raise spirits by showing you the progress of humanist ideals and vision under very difficult circumstances. I first learned about the Uganda Humanist Schools in 2011 on sabbatical when I attended the World Humanist Congress in Oslo, Norway. The Congress is held every 3 years by Humanists International. The American Ethical Union is a founding member of this. It used to be called the International Humanist and Ethical Union. And I think here in America, and particularly in Missouri, we often feel like humanism is this little secret that we have to explain to our friends and family, but it is a significant and growing force all over the world. And I've been seeking an international project for the Ethical Society because while it's important, very important to support members of the wider St. Louis community with food drives and blood drives and numerous service and ethical action projects throughout the year, like I know Mid-Rivers does, I think it's also important to support members of our much wider humanist community, people in the poorest places in the world where humanist values and beliefs are truly under threat, and practically where our resources can mean the difference literally between life and death, and where our dollars go really far. The Ugandan Humanist Schools are the creation of Ugandan humanists who strive to transform their communities and who see in humanism the values and practices to help them do that. Values and practices such as equal opportunity for all genders, critical thinking, rejection of supernaturalism, and respect and mutual aid between all people. Now, in Uganda, schooling for various reasons is mostly private, particularly at the upper levels, and it is mostly religious, traditionally religious, that is. So providing affordable, quality, secular schooling is a major priority for Ugandan humanists. This is the current cover photo for the Facebook page of the Ugandan Humanist Association. It's a little fuzzy, but I really love it. Women stepping out. Empowering women is a large part of the mission of the Ugandan Humanists. The two schools the Ethical Society supports directly are Isaac Newton High School in Katera, Masaka, which was founded by director Peter Kisirinya in 2004, and Mustard Seed School in Busota, Kamuli, which was founded by Moses Kamya in 2005. And here are pictures of Peter and Moses. Peter and Moses in 2008, a few years after they had founded their schools, they formed the Uganda Humanist Schools Association. And that has sponsored professional development training and conferences, and it promotes a humanist approach to learning. And here's a picture of one of their teachers' conferences a few years ago. What does humanism mean to our friends in Uganda? Does it mean the same sorts of things as it does to us here in America? I think very much, although they have some particular emphases there. But the aims of the Uganda Humanist Schools Association include to develop self-confident students who care for each other and for their local communities, to encourage students to be open-minded and questioning, and to respect evidence and appreciate the need for shared human values. The association also promotes human rights, gender and racial equality, and the rights of individuals to choose their personal life stance. Now, I want to say that the information I'm sharing this morning is drawn in large part from the extensive reports of the Uganda Humanist Schools Trust. Now, this trust is a nonprofit organization. It's based in the UK, and it shares information about the schools, and it raises funds to support them. The trust has donors from all over the world, and it arranges for a friendship visit each summer to the schools. Participants over the years have included representatives from humanist organizations from the UK and Australia and Germany and St. Louis. Ethical Society of St. Louis member Ed Schmidt visited the schools twice, and I believe he gave a platform on the schools to Mid-Rivers several years ago. I'm sad to share, if you don't know, that Ed died last year. He had a long battle with prostate cancer. Ed taught in East Africa when he was young, and he kept up his Swahili all these years, and Swahili is one of the common languages used at the schools. The other is English. So his initial involvement in this project was really invaluable in giving us information and confidence in the Schools Association and the Schools Trust. It can be quite tricky to evaluate ethical action projects, particularly ones that are so far away. And so it was really great to have Ed be able to go there and also to understand what schooling is like in Uganda. Ed served on the board of the Ugandan Schools Trust for several years, and he's been succeeded by Ethical Society of St. Louis member Crystal White. So we still have a local person on the board of the trust. So what do the schools do? Well, they teach all the standard material of the National Uganda curriculum, and they do it very well. But the school also strives to create well-rounded young adults. And I'm sorry that some of these pictures are a little fuzzy again. Over the years, they've been adding everything from fine arts classes in painting and drawing and fabric printing and wood carving and pottery to a variety of extracurricular clubs and activities. And last time I talked to you guys, I talked about wildlife gardening. So I wanted to point out that at Mustard Seed School, a wildlife club has planted a butterfly garden. So even in Africa, across the globe, they are working on the same kinds of projects and interests that we are here, which I think is interesting. There's also an entrepreneurship club, which gives students experience running a business, such as growing and selling eggplants, including preparing a business plan, obtaining funds, buying materials, creating and selling a product, and bookkeeping. And Uganda is like much of the world, and like America, that sports are important to student development and a source of school pride and publicity. And a few years ago, the trust helped the Mustard Seed School create a proper soccer field. And thanks to the increased opportunity to practice and play, the boys soccer team won a district trophy and reached the regional quarterfinals, while the girls soccer team also did well and reached their district quarterfinals. They probably call it football there. As for academics, in the relatively short time the schools have been in operation, their approach and the incredible hard work and the dedication of their leadership and staff and students has led to ever-rising national test scores. And these test scores are crucial in Uganda for students to be able to go on to higher education, whether that's in a vocational school or a university. So these test scores are really used all over the country. They're put in the newspapers. It's how people figure out whether or not they want to go to a school. As important, the students love the schools, and because of all these things, the schools have become highly respected in their local communities, and they've become ever more popular each year, growing in enrollment. In fact, both are expanding as fast as they can to meet the demand. And as of last year, they basically reached their capacity of 600 students each, with slightly more girls than boys, which is terrific. The popularity and growth of the schools is also due to investments in infrastructure made by the school's trust. So this is a new girls' dorm that was built with donations from the Ethical Society community. It has 12 large rooms. It can comfortably fit 8 girls to a room in bunk beds, which might seem crowded to us, but is pretty spacious for them. Unlike previous dorms, the rooms have individual ceilings to prevent the spread of malaria and other illnesses. It also has electric lighting and adjoining washrooms and flush toilets. We were contacted to ask about the naming of the dorm, and we said that we wanted the students to name it, perhaps after someone that they admired or saw as a role model. They came up with a list of international outstanding women who advocate for girls' education, and they held a vote. The runners-up were Erna Solberg, Prime Minister of Norway, Michelle Bachelet, President of Chile, and Angelique Kidjo, a West African singer-songwriter from Benin. And the winner, whom the new dorm is now named for, was Malala Yousafzai of Pakistan. Probably most of you know her. She was shot by the Taliban for her bravery fighting for girls' education and survived and is still fighting for it and became the youngest Nobel Prize winner. I loved the whole naming process and how democratic it was and inspiring. And I think that Malala is certainly a fitting choice. And I love this poster too, because here is this girl from Pakistan and funded by the Ethical Society. Underneath that, it says through Humanists UK. So all kinds of stuff going together there. Other infrastructure developments are perhaps less glamorous, but also very important, such as full bathrooms for the school clinics. Both high schools now have a health clinic and a school nurse who handles everything from flu to wounds to ringworm to malaria, including training students and their families in the use of mosquito nets and ensuring that students have all their vaccinations. And as an example of how far American dollars can go in Uganda, the basic costs of the school clinic and nurse are covered by a fee for each boarding student of about $5 a year. Health relates very much to sex and gender as well. The schools strive to influence young men and women to make education their priority rather than starting families. They also warn especially girls not to be taken in by the promises or threats of older men. Now this is Mustard Seed School. And this is one of the newer building blocks with electric light. The school also secured long-term leases to its land, which is great because a legal land situation in Uganda is kind of bizarre and basically pretty precarious. They're trying to figure it out, but there's still a lot of corruption and other issues there. So it's very reassuring for the future of the school that they've really clarified the land situation. So overall, we've been following these schools for years, and they've been around now for years and growing and doing better and better each year. And it's wonderful that there is so much good news. But I want to be honest that they also have a lot of challenges. The biggest ongoing challenge is the same one facing the whole of humanity, which is climate change. Rising average temperatures have increased both flooding and drought everywhere, particularly in Africa, and particularly in places where they don't really have the resources to cope. So in Uganda, when crops fail, there are food shortages. And in the Mustard Seed School area, when there's severe climate disruption, people actually die of starvation in the surrounding areas. A lot of our students are either orphans or have only one parent for various reasons having to do with disease and sometimes even starvation. Climate change also directly affects the schools in several ways. Most students' families are subsistence farmers, So when their crops fail, they no longer have money for school fees. The food costs for the school go up when food is scarce, and water tables are falling and wells are going dry. Mustard Seed School initially was allowed to use a well owned by the Catholic Church next door, but this turned out to be conditional on the priest leading prayers at the school. And because this school respects the rights of all students and staff to believe or not believe, practice or not practice any religion, they would not agree to this. So access to the well became very limited. And over the past several years, Mustard Seed built its own wells, but with climate change, each well would go dry and then they would have to drill farther away. And they were taking a lot of time and effort from the students to carry water from the wells. So with the help of donations, the school was able to connect to a municipal water system about a mile away. And this is a safer and more reliable water source for the school and the whole neighborhood. It is wonderful that with overseas partners, the schools are finding ways to mitigate some of these effects of climate change, but the effects will likely only get worse. And when people in developed countries, some people are now saying overdeveloped countries like America, talk about climate change, it's often frustrating to me because we talk about it as something that we will have to deal with in the future. You know, we'll have to build higher seawalls, things like that. And I think we're much less aware that climate change is hurting and killing people right now. So one of the things about our relationship with these schools is I think it reminds and motivates us to fight climate change now, not tomorrow, and to see it as a true immediate emergency. Another challenge in Uganda is that most people do not have bank accounts, so most transactions are carried out in cash, which creates security risks. And a few years ago, Director Moses and his colleague Tidio were transporting the summer teacher bonuses. These bonuses are a necessary incentive to keep good teachers. They were transporting it from the bank to the school to disperse when they were held up. And Tidio was shot in the arm during the robbery. Here he is looking very sad in bed. But there's a happy ending, which is that when this story got out on social media, supporters of the schools were able to replace the bonuses and pay his hospital bills. And to prevent more robberies in the future, they covered the initial fees and the small deposits that are required to open bank accounts for all the teachers at Mustard Seed School. So now all pay is transferred directly into their accounts and nobody has to carry around sacks of cash anymore and deal with all the problems that that creates. Other problems that the schools have, I think, are hard for us even to imagine. Isaac Newton a few years ago faced a crisis in enrollment because a rival school started a rumor that evil spirits were haunting the school, which I think particularly around Halloween for us might seem silly, but this was a very serious threat to the school. The director, Peter, successfully countered these rumors in part through a public education campaign that he undertook in the surrounding area, debunking claims of witchcraft and superstition in general and explaining the positive philosophy of humanism. I think he also slept at the school a few nights to prove that he survived. So I want to talk a little bit about Ugandan humanism. The schools welcome students of all beliefs and worldviews, and the school founders have been working to introduce humanist values and practices to the wider community. Several years ago, the Trust facilitated a Ugandan Humanist Ethos project. This was coordinated by Mustard Seed's director, Moses, and the conference brought together staff from both schools to create a common statement on their guiding principles. The humanist ethos they created asserts the rights and responsibilities of teachers and learners. The nonviolent forms of discipline used in the schools, there's still a lot of physical punishment that goes on in Ugandan schools, but the humanist schools are very strong in saying that they will not use those kinds of tactics. They also promote universal ethical values based on empathy and varieties of the golden rule, and that include non-discrimination and human rights, democracy and responsibility, science and the arts, and care for future generations. Students and staff now sign pledges to uphold the humanist ethos, and it's displayed on posters around the school grounds. The students are also asked to create yearly personal goals related to self-growth, care for others, responsible citizenship, and care for the environment. And I really like this idea. I think we should all be making such yearly goals, maybe at New Year's Eve. The schools also celebrate international secular holidays like World Environment Day, World Humanist Day, which is June 21st, if you don't know, Darwin Day, World AIDS Day, International Women's Day. Each school also now has a Humanist Student Association. It meets on Sundays when the Christian members of the school attend their services. The focus of the Humanist Students group is service, which I think is great, that they're truly living out deed before creed. The Isaac Newton Humanist Association, which has 50 students, by the way, which is more than most American humanist student groups have, created a community service volunteer program. The first project was to improve sanitation and hygiene for 8 local families by building drying racks for cooking utensils and repairing pit latrines and building hand washing stations near the latrines and teaching about the importance of hand washing. They also donated soap to these families. They also cleared grass around the houses to deter snakes, another thing we don't really have to deal with as much here. And as the schools prosper, they're reaching out beyond their walls in lots of ways. Isaac Newton High School, with government grants and help from humanists in England and California, brought clean, renewable hydroelectric power to the school and the surrounding villages. Building on this community partnership, a new nonprofit community organization was created, which focuses on promoting local economic and social development. They named the group Isaac Newton Community-Based Initiatives, Improving Lives Through Sustainable Agricultural Practices. And they study more effective and sustainable farming practices. They set up co-ops to help coffee growers process their beans and therefore make more money from their crops instead of selling the beans unprocessed. They also have ethical goals, which include introducing secular ethics to the community to counter discrimination based on religion, gender, tribe, political party, and other differences. And I just wanted to say that sometimes I think even thoughtful and well-meaning people from more developed places can come to view people from less developed places sort of as less sophisticated than us, as people who are merely needy, who need our help. And what I think is so wonderful about these humanist and community initiatives that the schools are doing is that they're inspiring, and they're also reminders that while the Ugandan schools and the communities do need and appreciate our help, they're also themselves made up of thoughtful and well-meaning people who are sophisticated about their situation and who also seek to help those less fortunate than themselves. They are doing wonderful things in their communities, and it is just a privilege to be able to aid them in their efforts. It has also been wonderful to see the growing support of the ethical community for the Ugandan Humanist Schools. We started, I say we, it's now they, I guess, the Ethical Society of St. Louis, and again, with several ethical societies and individuals started supporting these schools, I think 7 years ago. And my first hope was that we would be able to have one scholarship. And now I think we're up to about 36 full boarding scholarships for girls, as well as some other donations I'll talk about in a second. They're boarding school scholarships because boarding keeps the students in a safe environment. It provides them with 3 meals a day. It also gives them a safe place to study at night and electricity to study at night, because most students come from extremely poor homes with no running water or electricity. I read a school staff report that says we are finding that boarding students perform better in exams than day students. They escape the chores they would be expected to do if they lived at home: digging, housework, fetching water, food preparation, and cooking. So they have more time for schoolwork, as well as having access to books, computers, lighting at night, and desk space to work. Girls in particular are protected from the sexual harassment that they can sometimes experience in the villages and while walking back and forth to school. Even within the schools, though, unfortunately, girls still tend to drop out of school at a higher rate than boys. Sometimes the girls are needed to help out at home, and sometimes their families want them to marry early because the marriage will bring the family a bride price. It is illegal now in Uganda for women to be forced to marry against their will, though. So if a female student is being forced to marry and the schools find out, they can call the police and they can undertake to help the girls return to school, which they have done. So we chose to support girls' scholarships because of the special challenges that girls and young women face in getting an education and pursuing careers. One of the graduating seniors wrote, "I believe that the most wonderful gift anybody can give another is education. I have loved school very much. I've been able to realize my dreams and what I am capable of doing. I've been given chances to express myself freely as a girl." But that is not all. I'm going to go back to that one for a second. The Uganda Humanist Schools Trust is a British charity, and Brexit has been hard on the pound, but good for American dollars. So Americans have been able to fund additional beds and mosquito nets for the dorms, supplies for the school clinics, and for several years now, a 1-year supply of AfroPads for all girls in both schools. This is an AfroPad factory. They're locally made reusable sanitary pads. And having them, as you can imagine, is really crucial for girls' health and educational opportunities. And the availability of sanitary pads noticeably improves girls' concentration and attendance in class. Last but not least, ethical folks have been supporting a program called Reading for Pleasure. And I'm guessing that most of us in ethical societies have had reading as an important source of pleasure in our lives since we were young, and certainly during the COVID time, I think we've been reading even more. In developing areas such as these schools are in, though, because of the shortage of reading material and time and light, almost all student reading is study work. So having the opportunity and encouragement to read for pleasure, it not only increases reading skill, it opens up this whole new world of experience and a lifetime font of joy, I would say, as a reading lover myself. So I think recently a lot of us have been having trouble finding reasons to feel positive. Many have told me that they are struggling to find hope and joy in our troubled world. And I look at our Ugandan friends and how hard they work and all that they have to overcome, and at the immense joy and excitement that they still express in living and learning and working and playing and having the chance to create a better life for themselves and their families and their community and their country. I will just say, as a brief aside and a COVID update, that they did have to close the schools in March for a semester, but they are opening up again with proper safeguards in about 2 weeks. So they are itching to get back to school. So the last thing I'll just say is that psychologists tell us that joy is contagious. Not only COVID, but also joy is contagious. So I think our Ugandan friends can be a source of joy for us and a lesson and a challenge, because how dare we be any less joyful when we're all so fortunate to have what we have and to be able to do all the good that we can do. We are alive and we have important work to do, and what greater joy could there be? As practical note to end, I will just say that if you do decide to support these schools in some way, and you can find out tons more about them by looking up the Ugandan Humanist Schools Trust, you can support them directly through the trust, or you can join with the Ethical Society of St. Louis, which has been every year collecting monies from individuals and different ethical societies, and then doing one wire transfer, because that saves a lot of costs that way. A scholarship has only been $480 for a full year of room and board and books and uniform. So it's kind of crazy how far our dollars can go in Uganda. But if you do decide to give, I would just ask that you give from a place of joy and with gratitude and wonder at what we can achieve, all of us all over the world, as humanists together. So thank you for letting me share this with you today. And I would be happy to answer questions or talk more about the schools or anything you like. I will stop my share now. And I will come back in my little box.
There you go. Thank you, Kate.
I had like a million other things to say, so I hope that wasn't too long.
No, that was perfect. Thank you so much. Anybody have questions or comments that they want to throw out there? Oh, come on. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, so you're saying it's $480 a year to sponsor a student? That's what it costs American wise for one of them to be on, I guess, on campus for the entire year?
Yeah, yeah. As I said, for an entire year of room and board and books and uniform and everything else, it's it's $480, which is pretty amazing.
That is incredible. And if we wanted to go ahead
It was funny the first time.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just gonna say something.
Oh,
Didn't
so
matter.
if we wanted to sponsor a student, or where do we need to go, or what do we need to do in regards to that?
So if you wanted to, I think you can sponsor directly through the trust. So you could go to their website and look into it. The Ethical Society of St. Louis has also been, they every year, it has been in December, does a fundraiser and collects money from people to pool and do scholarships, and also then if there's leftover money to do these other kinds of projects like the AfroPads and the books and stuff. I think in some ways that's easier, because I always like when I can give through another organization so that nobody has my name, because I don't need to get any more solicitations from anybody. I mean, the trust is great, but like every organization, I'm sure they'd be like, hey, you're a new donor. But also because there are some costs that have to do with transferring money overseas and those kinds of things. So the society does that. So that is one way that you could do it if you wanted to, or you could go directly through the trust.
Okay. Well, we'll
and
watch.
anyone, feel free to email me if you have questions.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Andy, you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, so we just write a check to the St. Louis Ethical Society and indicate that we want the money to be used for the Humanist School in Uganda. Is that how we do it?
Yeah. You write the check, the Ethical Society of St. Louis, and on the memo, you just write Ugandan schools. Nancy is very used to dealing with donations for the school. And it doesn't have to be $480. I mean, if you want to sponsor a student, that's fantastic. But obviously, any amount of money is wonderful and goes a long way there.
Maddie, you have a question?
A question and a comment. Before the Uganda built their water well, you said they were sharing it with their neighbor, which was a Catholic church. So how is their relationship with their neighbor, the Catholic church, now that they have their own well?
Well, I think, they were using the well of the church, but the church was only letting them do that if the priest could come and kind of proselytize to them,
Right.
which they were not cool with because they're a humanist organization. So I think their relationship is fine now. I mean, they each have their own way of doing things.
You're not
And
aware of
so-
any discrimination or negative impacts, or? I was just curious.
Yeah, I think one of the things that the schools have really been trying to do is educate people as to what humanism means, because obviously there was a lot of, it's not that well known, because they do support human rights and even gay rights to a certain extent, which is very controversial in Uganda. There was some pushback from people, or some discrimination definitely against this. But I think as they've been going out into the community, as they've been doing these projects, as they've been showing that they are really, they're not just a good school for their own students, but that their students are really helping the whole community. I think it's really helping to change people's minds about what humanism means. It also depends. It's interesting to see the difference between people, particularly Peter and Moses. Peter is a very sort of quiet, serious guy, and he's not big on like social media, whereas Moses is all over Facebook with kind of like, he'll post things about the dangers of religion and other stuff. It's like different members of ethical societies, some of them are like, oh, whatever, people can believe what they believe, and some of them are on Facebook like, no, religion is bad for you and it does bad things. So they have those kind of differences among them too.
Very good.
Lee,
Hey,
did
I
you have a
was-
question?
Lee?
Good. I was just wondering, Sarah Vagey, do you think that maybe people could send their money to our ethical society and we put it together and send it to?
I think that's a great idea. And Kate, you said in December is the big drive?
Yes, there's usually a what they were doing in St. Louis. I don't know what they're going to do this year, but we would make a lunch with traditional Ugandan food, which is very simple but very delicious in my opinion. And then people would kind of give whatever they wanted at the lunch, and then but they would also a number of people also decided to give sort of separately. And then so we would collect all that money and then send it in January. So I would talk to the Ethical Society of St. Louis, and you have a board member here right now in Mary Ellen. But I think that's a nice way to do it. Some other ethical societies do that too.
Okay, yeah.
They kind of
that's a
collect
great
their
idea.
money and then they send.
Lee, maybe we can do that in November or something.
Okay, well, thank you, Kate and everybody. I do have a few announcements to make. Friday, October 10th is our monthly lunch group, which will be meeting at Nobelis, I'm sorry,